Welcome everybody to the Interagency briefing for contracting for OCONUS Logistics and Life Support. We're glad you decided to join us today. I'm Dave Lowe. I'm the GovBrief host, and with us live we have Farron McFarland. He's the CEO of Waypoint Global. Say hey, Farron.
Hello all.
That's right. And so a little bit about Farron. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. We want to welcome all the agencies that are joining us today. We have folks registered from all over the place because there's certain functions that life support provides help with across the board, including and you've done a lot of work with the Army and the Navy, Farron. So that's recognizable. But we also have folks that need to travel outside the country with other types of with visitation. So quick disclaimer, this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency. It's provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only. And all participation in this briefing is voluntary, and any engagement by government folks, that's you, is not an indication or endorsement of or commitment to purchase from any vendor. And the reason why we say that is so that we can talk and dialogue, and we can get the best practices that you have as well. So with that, if you have any questions, you can ask those questions by opening that panel. You can type that in down the bottom, and you can also raise your hand and let us know that you'd like to talk, and we can unmute you if you have access via your computer or you called in and entered the audio pin. And there's folks that will be joining us by phone that can't actually get to us because of not being able to get through the IT security. So you can also email us if you have a question at govsupport@waypoint-global.com. That will be visible throughout the presentation so that you can continue to have that ready. If you'd like to shoot us an email, we will respond to you as part of this or after the presentation. And finally, if you like the way that Farron looks today, and that would be shocking, but if you did, you can grab this little doodah. It could be above or below, but you can grab this little panel and you can make us expand, or you can make us disappear altogether. So there you go. So that is the kind of the housekeeping things. Now we're going to talk about Waypoint Global. Why Farron was asked to do this interagency briefing. What is life support? When is life support used? Typical contracting issues, best practices, and then we'll talk about some procurement options of the way that you can find life support for being able to fulfill that. We will also be asking some polls, and with that, I'm going to ask the first one. I am here because. Why are you here? You're new to life support, and you're looking for additional information. You have a life support issue that you need to solve. I want to understand about life support best practices, or I expect a life support requirement. You can choose more than one, I do believe, and you can let us know exactly what's on your mind. Or if you're familiar with Waypoint and you're interested in how they do their approach. So with that, you can vote, and we will keep you posted on what it is that you would like to see. So with that, I'm going to give you another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Thank you very much. And we'll let people know what's happening. New to life support? Great. We're glad that you're here. If you have a life support issue, that's even better because we can help you solve those things. And we'll get an understanding of those of each set. So we're all in this together, and we want to make sure that we answer your questions and keep you posted. So tell us, Farron. Now, I will say this. I know where Farron is right now, and while he's based in South Dakota, where are you right now?
Key West.
Key West. So he started the company, launched it in South Dakota, and then moved to Key West. So he runs all of his operations out of Key West, I think, right? Is that right?
Our main office is still in Brookings, South Dakota.
Okay, well, there you go.
I spend about 3 months a year in the United States.
Okay.
And those 3 months a year I choose to spend in Key West.
And a smart man he is, because I'm sure that the time that he doesn't spend in South Dakota is December and January.
I actually don't spend any time in South Dakota.
Tell us about Waypoint Global and what made you start the company back in 2010.
In 2007, I first went into Afghanistan, and I was in Afghanistan for 5 years. For 2.5 of those years, I was direct employee of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. When I left the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in 2010, I opened up Waypoint, doing basically what we call it was Tiger Team Corrections. I was a member of a Tiger Team with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers doing corrective actions related to construction in Afghanistan. And then opportunities presented themselves, to go on with that. And I started it out in Afghanistan, predominantly working, and then rapidly migrated out of Afghanistan. So I didn't want to be retired. And I mean, I've got the best job on earth. I travel all over the world. I spend time with predominantly U.S. military personnel who are the finest clients in the world and finest people in the world.
Awesome.
And it's where I feel comfortable. So I just stayed in it.
And that's what you do. You do international logistics, and you do it across Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. I know you have a focus right now. You're doing a lot of work in South America, right?
Central and South America has probably represents 80% of our work.
Okay.
We do, by contract volume, dollar-wise, it probably represents 50%. But by the number of missions, about 80%. Our largest contract takes place in Africa.
Okay.
But,
Awesome. So, and you are a small business, and you have excellent CPARs and PPQs, which we'll be talking about in a little bit, and we'll show you some of those things. With that, let's talk about what life support is for the folks that are new. Let us tell. We have to move people from one place to another, and what you do is support their mission to help them so that they can fulfill their mission. But there's a lot of behind the scenes things that have to happen. We'll do some case studies in a minute, but give us an overview of some of the things that you guys do.
Well, typically what happens is a branch of the U.S. government, whether it be military, civilian, will determine that they have a function that they need to perform in another location. When they determine that they need to perform this function, then they determine how are they going to support the execution. That's what our company does, Waypoint. Keeping in mind that the client is not coming or traveling to a location for the experience of life support. They're traveling to a location to perform a defined, predetermined function. What Waypoint does is we work with contracting officers, preferably at the outset, in the sources sought phase, helping, identifying potential requirements and identifying things that I call lessons learned. So to assist the contracting officer in defining a scope of work that can come out for bid. All right. We do this predominantly when we do this, it's to narrow and define the scope into a clear vision of what's required, so that everyone, so that our competitors understand that this is what the client is expecting.
Yeah.
Now, it sounded odd to say, but the reason I say that is when you're working in the Sudan, when you're working in Uganda, when you're working in Nigeria, when you're working in Mauritania, or even the majority of Central and South American countries, we face competitors when it goes lowest price technically acceptable. We face competitors that don't truly understand what the client's expectation of service is. When you have an aircraft and flyaway mission and there's going to be line haul, when you say that you need a telehandler to offload that C-130, there's a reason it has to be a telehandler. To offload that C-130, nothing else can approach the rear ramp without making contact with the tail of the aircraft. All right. There are specific things that are needed throughout every mission, whether it be medications, internet access, food, all of the various things that can come into life support that we like to work at the sources sought level so that we can pose questions to the contracting officer, helping them narrow up through the question and answer session what the expectation is.
And we're going to be talking a lot about exactly that in a few minutes, because of the importance of knowing exactly what you want to be able to fulfill that mission, what those things mean, is little things that turn into big things if you're not paying attention. So who uses life support? A lot of work in the DoD, obviously, right?
I mean, predominantly it's Department of Defense. Nobody sends more people abroad to accomplish a more diverse mission list than the Department of Defense.
But then we see some other civilian agencies that need to send scientists someplace, or a group of leaders that need to visit. So we do see some of those. So you have senior military and executives, but then you have program and project management folks that are on the ground that need to be able to fulfill a particular mission. Special studies, a lot of CDC work also requires these. But anytime folks have to move from point A to point B, that's when they engage somebody that does life support services. Isn't that right?
Yes, I mean, it's when you have people traveling across your locations, that's when we come into play. We come in and we support your requirements to keep your people performing their mission.
And let's talk about that for just a minute. So if we're talking about issues for folks that have, maybe for folks, if you don't have a life support issue yet, maybe it's just because you're learning, but you're not sure yet. But let us know. Do you have vendor issues with missing deadlines and meeting deliverables? If you've done it before, you've probably experienced these things. Dealing with folks on site in the population that is indigenous to the country, gaining access. Some of it revolves around safety and security, and as Farron was talking about, being pre-planning, accurate assessment of what is really needed. That is really important for a successful mission, notwithstanding the life support side of things. And change orders and budget busting. We'll be talking about that one as well. So we'll give you a little bit more, just a couple more minutes to let us know, and we'll get those pieces in play. So with that, we'll share some of the results. A lot of folks aren't really sure yet. Vendor issues, it plays a key role. Pre-planning and is the other piece. So we appreciate you participating in that. That's important, so that we can stay on track. So let's talk about typical contracting issues. You mentioned a contracting term, lowest price technically acceptable, which creates a lot of problems in these instances because of these very things. And it's easy to look technically acceptable on paper, but it's very difficult, especially if the requirements are not as defined as they should be, right?
Well, what I want to say about LPTA is I owe my business to LPTA. All right. Everyone that ever started owes their business to LPTA. So I have no difficulties utilizing LPTA. The issue with LPTA is the specificity in the scope of work. All right. Now, so frequently, we as Americans take a certain level of performance, a certain level of service, a certain definition of a word to mean something. And we'll use an example, a late model car. If you say that something is late model, automatically we assume within 5 years. All right. Trust me, the United States of America is the only place that thinks that way. Sorry, I mean, you get into certain Arabic countries, certain first world countries, yes. But where we work, where we're doing mission support to austere standards, late model means it runs. And I can go on ad nauseum. There's things that some contracting officers wouldn't think about because they haven't been exposed to it. For instance, quickly, in Central America, Honduras, Guatemala, there is no requirement, zero, for a specific vehicle license or insurance of any type on a car. A car can legally be driven down the road with no insurance. The issue then becomes when we rent vehicles in support of these missions, once you put an American passenger in that vehicle and you make it an American mission vehicle, I don't even need to go on. People enjoy bumping into us. We make sure that all of our vehicles have insurance, of course.
So let's talk about real quick. Let's talk about how do you detail that? You just mentioned it, making sure that they're licensed, insured. We'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. But understanding the execution strategy, and tell us about this quality assurance surveillance plan, or QASP. That's how you say it, right? Tell us about that. How do you know that you're getting what you're supposed to get when you're abroad?
What rarely happens, but what I would like to see in all contracts, when it comes to deliverables, when the client first comes onto the ground, when we're meeting and dealing with the COR, if the contract would require a quality assurance surveillance plan, that proof of these compliance factors was a component of the QASP, we provide them ourselves currently because that's just the nature of our business. It's part of our lessons learned.
Right.
But if you have a new COR, which you so frequently do, let's say that he's a CB traveling someplace and this is his first demand mission. He may or may not be aware that he has the right, to say, I need to see these things.
Mm-hmm.
I need to know that we're compliant. But if they're within the QASP, the Quality Assurance Surveillance Plan, as can be required within the contract and can be a requirement upon the first day of delivery, it's very easy to go through the checklist, show the background checks, show proof of insurance, show registration, show license, show bottled water certification, show your vector controls, for your food service, show your inspections, show that, make me earn your work.
And so let's talk about one of the other pieces right there, because this one that talks about subcontractor lists is one of the key things that happens with contracts is non-payment of subcontractors, especially locally, which creates an incredible challenge for you the next time that you go into that location. And it really creates a lot of animosity and ability to be able to fulfill the mission overall. So that's why, whoops. I don't know what happened there. There we go.
Actually, and what I want to say about that, are you done?
No, I'm good. Right ahead.
What I'd like to say about that is that it doesn't matter where I go, whether it be Africa, Central America, South America, Europe, the Middle East. Frequently, it is the norm to come across vendors that have supported previous missions that are still trying to collect. Now, U.S. government contractors, and I forget the clause, the U.S. government's not a direct participant between contractor and his subcontracts. There is no flow through there. But contracting officers have the ability and the right to make me say, Farron, I want to know who your primary vendors are, or all your vendors. And at the end of the project, before you submit your final invoice, we would like, proof of payment or lien waivers from your vendors. It to me doesn't create any extra work because it's what we do. We get a sign off when we pay people, but the grief that we cause, that poor performers cause by getting a contract, you get somebody that gets their first $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 contract, and they see the ability to keep an additional $150,000 plus by taking advantage of their least informed suppliers. We're there to do a goodwill mission. We're there to perform a mission that's almost universally meant
Mm-hmm.
to create goodwill in the communities and in the areas.
Yep.
And we end up through bad actors getting besmirched with it.
Yep.
Right? So I would love to see every contracting officer say, hey, you got to prove to me before I pay you that you paid them.
Nice. And the other one is no financial penalty for poor performance. And we've talked about this at length, you and I have, of dealing with how do you put that into the contract verbiage to be able to say, hey, you've got to meet these deliverables. And if you don't, that there's a financial penalty associated with it. And you can include that in that contract, can't you?
Yeah, there's a lot of great guidance and great samples. I've got several up on my computer
Mm-hmm.
that are available, that are U.S. government documents. They're typically contained within the quality assurance surveillance plan.
Right.
If I make a late delivery of a service, there would be a measurable impact to the mission. It's predefined within the quality assurance surveillance plan. There are limits, for how much you can take, but you can penalize contractors. And if you threaten to penalize us enough, you're going to gain conformance. It's
Very
not an
good
issue
point.
that I have, but it's an issue that I've seen occur enough that, if people understand that they entered into a contract, the contract has specific requirements for performance, and failure to meet those specific requirements for performance has a financial repercussion, they behave better.
Mm-hmm. And it makes them pay attention to what's most important, which is the support of the overall mission and the importance of the life support function. So there's a couple of different methodologies that this happens under. There's a life support contract and there's a BOSS contract. So you'll notice that in the life support contract, it's usually 90 days or less. These are not written in stone, right, Farron? These are kind of, there's a lot of gray area because there's a lot of room between 90 days and a year, right? So which ones are used for which? So tell us about the difference between life support and a BOSS contract and what a BOSS contract is.
Well, life support typically is when you have a defined mission. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
I've got this group of individuals going to this location to accomplish this, and they're going to be here for this predetermined period of time. Base operating service agreements, BOSS contracts, are typically when we're going to be there for a longer period of time, an extended period of time, and there are facilities
Mm-hmm.
that need to be maintained. The difference between BOSS and life support is predominantly an extended period of time, and with an increased level of infrastructure performance that has to be maintained. But they're interchangeable. You can use one, you can use the other.
Yep.
There is no hard fast rule for it.
And there's like we said, there's a lot of difference between 90 days and a year, and there's a lot of gray areas there. If you need specifics on that, we can provide that as well, and the types of contracts. Let's look at a couple of case studies. And
let me make one correction to what I just said.
Sure.
Between life support and BOSS contracts, it's frequently one is chosen over the other based upon the color of money, and that's something that makes sense to the contracting officers. What pot is coming out of?
Right, because that's right, because a lot of this comes from different budget pots, right? So, well, let's talk about a couple of case studies for best practices. So, you had an issue, or you had a project in Honduras in 2015, and we'll take a look at some of the pictures. This happens to be the departure. This is the arrival, and arriving in Honduras to support. What is the Honduras trip to support?
Well, it's the Joint High-Speed Vessel Honduras mission. That project was a continuing promise, a medical mission. That was Southern Partnership. That was the U.S. military coming in, performing construction activities and joint training missions with local national countries.
And you can see the delivery of construction supplies. The
U.S. military showed up. They came in they were airlifted in Then the USS Spirit arrived and delivered other additional materials and equipment. We supplied all the construction equipment, all the construction materials, all the life support requirements, from their tent bases to their meals, all the sanitary services, bottled water, shower facilities, lavatory facilities, vehicles, interpreters, the cradle to grave.
Cradle to grave. And you notice the vehicles are late model vehicles according to our standards, not just theirs. Because we'll show you a couple of examples of not so late model things. But you also did all the way, like you said, cradle to grave, including the fuel for aircraft that were.
We supply aircraft fuel. We supply. We've done that for DLA. That was a Marine Corps issue. But what you're looking at there.
Okay, cool. So that's one example of things that you've done. And let's talk about shockers and budget busters. So, for instance, you mentioned this before about vehicle licenses and insurance, whether they're inspected, with the model, and then we can talk a little bit about armored, because I think that there's some funny stories that you have. We can see the rather colorful buses that we have here. This is typical, right, in any of the Central and South America, right? Would this be typical for most of those?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter where you're at in the world. We call these jingle trucks, whether it's in the Middle East or Central South America. Now these vehicles are vehicles of pride. I want to be careful how I say it.
Sure.
These are very loved vehicles by their owners.
Sure.
But they do not meet our requirements, for the movement of U.S. military personnel.
And why not? Why don't they meet the requirements?
Anything from service records, bald tires, no seat belts, non-operating. I mean, air conditioning and these things is a rarity. Just the general state of service. Let's just go with that. It's what we do differently is, while I don't have a picture in the slide here, we rent standard coaches, what you're used to going down the road. So if that's not in the scope of work, what consists of line haul and transportation services? If you just say a 50 passenger bus and you're in Central South America, I'll guarantee you that's what you're going to get every time.
Yep.
All right.
And I'm sure that we have some folks online that have experienced that and then had to try to fill the void of not having that, right? Because the military is not even allowed to get on the bus, are they? It
just depends on where they're at and how badly they need to get there. No, it doesn't meet code or doesn't meet requirement. Will they get on it in a pinch when that's the only way they have to get someplace?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. So, and the other part is armored. So what have you seen out there with if you say it's an armored vehicle, if you're not very specific, what have you seen when you came into rescue contracts, which we know that you have, come in to say, hey, this is really not the right way to do it, and you had to come in after the fact of some other vendors that were in there. What have you seen?
In Uganda, what we had was they were asking for an LAV, light armored vehicle level 4. Now, when you say an LAV in a U.S. military RFP, it's very clear cut what that means. There isn't any level of doubt, what you're looking for, unless you don't really understand that LAV has a definition. All right, which most people aren't. And on trips up into the Sudan, what they were trying to do was to take Toyota Land Cruisers, and they had literally bolted on steel sheets of cold rolled steel CRS, 1/8-inch CRS onto the sides of the vehicles. And there's lots of funny stories about that, but that came up between you and I in a conversation that going back to defining a scope of work.
That's right.
And really tightening up. Just because you say that you want an LAV level 4, don't assume that everyone reading the RFP in what's not their native language to start with, English. The RFP is written in English using our acronyms, which we're great for,
right.
Being translated to, Hausa or Dari, Pashto, and it's not making the crossing.
Yeah. And we see this a lot, and you see some drivers there. That's not uncommon to have checkpoints and drivers with their papers or not having papers. Bottled water was another one that you would think would be a typical thing, but there are some countries that don't even have bottled water supply. They don't even have a way to do bottled water. So there's a couple of other budget busters and shockers when you get there. Real quick, another case study that you would like to point out is dealing with your trip in Colombia. This was recent. So the ship couldn't make it. It wound up being a flyaway mission, and you had 14 days to ramp up. And the reason why it says that's fast is because that's fast. And it was 65 personnel in 3 days, and you renovated all these places. Now, this is just to ramp up, and then you were expecting how many patients, and 11,000 showed up?
Well, what happened in Colombia is, due to bad weather, the spearhead couldn't make it.
Right.
We were given approximately a 14-day notice. We were asked if within a 14-day window we could ramp up and accommodate a flyaway mission where we supplied soup to nuts, every service, where they would not be bringing in anything, including generators and everything else. We renovated a school in those days to include 26 classrooms, 4 dormitories, and the cafeteria. The list of improvements that we made was extensive. It hadn't been maintained since 2010. It had no work. It had no operating lights, no water system, no sewer system, no power generation, no air conditioning, landscape, and everything. Just imagine a building that had been abandoned in a desert for essentially abandoned without maintenance, for 6 years. Yep. We stepped in. We brought all of our team leads in, on great local resources. In the 3 days, which we're referencing up there, is we built a team of 65 personnel that in the remaining 11 days was able to take it to the handover state where they were able to perform their mission.
And that we have to move on from this real quick and go through some of the best practices. But that was a great case study of how things can run and will run. So let's talk about best practices. You mentioned this before, and we really want to focus on this as a pre-mission site assessment. Very important to have that done, and you can do that as part of your sources sought. That turns into a detailed scope of work, which, again, the more detailed you are with it, and requiring a QASP as part of that is critical. So lightly touch on that real quick, Farron, on the importance of the pre-mission and site assessment. We've talked about it before, but reiterate that for everybody.
What our company Waypoint does is every time there's a sources sought come out that we want to bid, we actually travel to that location. We don't ever submit a mailbox bid, all right, or a phone-in bid. We go to the site, we do our pre-mission site assessment so that we can build a responsive RFP. What I would love to do is to receive more sources sought notices versus RFP notices. Once it's gotten to the RFP stage, there's nothing that really can be done other than a modification, to the RFP, where we're sending in questions, and frequently there's not enough time,
right,
to get it submitted and to get our information across. It does me no good to have greater knowledge than my competitors, to the barriers of entry. And what I mean by that is if I know that there's a problem to perform, and I recognize that in my bid submission and my competitors are unaware of it, that actually puts me at a disadvantage.
Wow.
Because I'm going to be bidding the realities on the ground versus what other people might consider to be the realities on the ground.
And that's important. That's important stuff. So the other pieces for best practices: require subcontractor proof of purchase, proof of payment before closeout, and do that liquidated damages penalty boldly stated in there. And you use this term a lot. Make me earn it. Make me earn the business, and make me deliver where where you're for what you're supposed to be able to deliver on. So
I'm not afraid of being held accountable. I'm not afraid of good competition.
absolutely.
Good competition only makes me better. I have no problem with competition as long as it's good competition. Yeah. Make us all earn your business.
Great statement. Love it. So with that, we're going to ask, I have a life support. I expect a life support requirement. When do you expect that? There's several people that already indicated that they're here on the way in for an immediate response. So we'll make sure we get in touch with you in the near future for Q1, Q2 of fiscal year 2018. And unlike the fiscal year spending that happens in September, a lot of what we do in planning and having to be someplace revolves around an event that doesn't happen by September. But Q3 or Q4 are just not sure, and that's okay. We can certainly, you can click more than one if you need to, but go ahead and submit that, and we'll make sure that we get the information to you and get you tied in with best practices so that you have what you need. With that, it's 2020 and 80. So there, some folks are not sure, which is fine, which is great. Even better that you're here learning about it and getting that. And with that, we're going to get to some questions. We do have some questions. Open up that panel or raise your hand and let us know what you have for us. And I will make sure that while we have Farron here, we can answer those questions if at all possible. So the first one is, will the presentation be made available? And the answer is yes, it will be made available. And we'll send that out as part of this. Here's one. How do you determine a successful life support mission? How do you grade that? Go ahead with that, Farron. That's right in your wheelhouse.
I don't determine a successful life support mission. The COR determines whether it's a successful life support mission. Myself personally, I believe a successful life support mission is represented if I'm invisible. You know, you're not there. No member of this mission is there to be involved or to interact with me. That's not their defined purpose. I mean, they do have a purpose to assure compliance, but my company's performance should be invisible. The things that you asked for, the dates that the COR is coordinated for the deliverables should just be there.
All right. And do you provide life support in Africa?
Yes.
All right. Is there any place that you don't supply life support?
I won't say I won't go anywhere. I will say the Sudan is incredibly challenging. I will say that I spent 5 years in Afghanistan, in the Middle East. I would go back, but it's not something that I'm aggressive.
You're not pursuing that aggressively, right?
Yeah.
Do you have experience with dignitaries? That's a great question.
Yes. Yes.
We're
performing in our side of the equation. I'm going to touch it quick. We're performing on the Unitas contracts. That's my wife's division.
Okay.
Conferences and things such as that.
All right. Can you provide a sample scope of work? And the answer is absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. And what does liquidated damage language look like? In fact, we'll send some of that out with the follow-up, right?
Yeah.
All right. And can you provide PPQ references?
Oh, please.
Now, please go ahead. That's
Somebody
right.
just threw that one to me.
So we're kind of running short on time, so we'll get right to my favorite slide, which is staying out of hot water. We've said it multiple times here, pre-mission site assessment. You can do that with sources sought, and it really helps the contractors, the vendors like Farron and Waypoint Global to be able to know early on and be able to engage you early on to tell you what you really need to know, especially if you're not familiar with the territory. This is one of my favorites that Farron is: make the vendors earn your business. No assumptions, no fudge. What does that mean, Farron? What does that mean?
It means if I can't tell you in writing how I'm going to do an approach to your project and execute it in a straight out narrative where you understand yourself exactly what I'm going to do in the performance of your work.
Yep.
If I can't present it on paper then I don't have a clear understanding in my mind.
That's exactly.
If I don't have a clear understanding in my mind, then I'm not going to have it. It's not going to get any better when I get on the ground.
That's right. And that revolves around creating those tight requirements, require the QASP, include liquidated damage clause, and verify the past performance. As Farron said, please read my PPQs, right? The PPQs those are the ones that you really want to pay attention to, making sure that your prime pays their bills and verify the vendor response details and make them earn your business. And the other thing that you can do is once you find vendors like Farron that really know their business, you can establish and use BPAs to continue. You can do this with life support contracts, just like you can do any other contract. And it gives you fast access and fast turnaround, especially as fiscal year end approaches. So that's a beautiful thing. A couple of procurement options if you want more information from Waypoint Global. The DUNS number, cage code's right there. If you need to run it through a GSA contract, no problem. That can happen. Hub Zone, 8A, woman-owned small business, service disabled, whatever you need. And we help all the folks that you already do business with. We can find ways to be able to get that. So with that, I need help with what is the last poll, and then we'll let you guys out of here. So with that, I need help with pre-planning, logistics, and life support for a current project, an issue with a project that you have right now, creating good requirement for life support. We always like that one. Or something else, please contact us and we'll make sure that we get to you. These really help us to be able to respond to you effectively. So we appreciate your participation in these. And with that, we're going to let you guys another 5 seconds and you can vote. 5, 4, 3, 2, and that's it. And we're going to go right back at this. What you're going to get in the follow-up, you get a copy of the presentation. You get the Q&A documents that we've already gone through, so we'll make sure that we put that in writing for you so that you can have that. We'll give you the Waypoint capabilities, the links to past performance, the PPQs especially, and supporting documents that you ask for. And if there's anything else that you need, you can reach out to Farron directly, and he can be reached at those 2 numbers. If you're calling in from out of the country, you can reach out on his worldwide cell phone, or you can reach out to him at Farron at waypoint-global.com. And any parting comments for the folks that joined us? Thanks for joining us, first of all. And what do you have to say, Farron, before everybody jumps off?
I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for hearing me out.
That's awesome. So thank you very much. We do appreciate you being here, and we'll make sure that we do the follow-up with you. Have a great rest of the summer and enjoy getting into the craziness of fiscal year-end spending. Try to stay sane, everybody. Have a great day.